Hello, hello. Welcome, friends, to Game Changers. Today, we're going to be talking to some incredible leaders. I'm Janelle. I'm really excited to see a lot of people who've joined on the chat who might watch at a later date. But I'm really excited to be hosting this webinar today. While we're waiting for everyone to join, if you would be so kind to go into the chat, drop your name, share where you're dialing in from today. And then I'll also ask a very lightweight question to our panelists before they introduce themselves, just as a little icebreaker on a small topic around AI. What do you think is one skill right now that every leader should be teaching themselves, learning, reading about, adopting when it comes to AI? Where are you spending your time right now? Feel free to jump in. Samina or Lauren, if you guys would like to pop in.
Happy to jump in. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Great question, Janelle. I can start by saying that I made a conscious decision about 9 to 12 months ago to get my hands dirty with AI, meaning testing every single tool that I can put my hands on, really starting to vibe code and see, okay, how complicated it is, how well it works, how complicated is the plumbing, right? 90% of doing things in AI initially seemed really easy, but then when you wanted to send something out for production, what I realized is that massaging the plumbing and making some of the things that we want to build work takes a little bit longer than anticipated. So I spent a lot of time there teaching myself how to use these tools so that I can host hackathons with my team and encourage them to lean in instead of maybe being overwhelmed or afraid of these tools, to really lead from the front and invite everyone into the process. So that was part one of how I'm spending my time. And part two, as an HR leader, I'm thinking, okay, what is the governance when it comes to AI? How do we make sure that the data that we put in the system is going to serve us and not work against us? What are the recommendations on how the organizations should deploy all of this data and how to use it in a way that makes sense? So I'm spending time in those areas. And on top of that, I see myself fascinated by all the research that's coming in terms of, how to think about pricing and how to think efficiencies and what makes sense to do as the next step as we are deploying AI across multiple departments and organizations. So I tend to spend a lot of time on this, but I tend to remind myself that the timely has to be paired with timeless so that I never forget about the other topics that are important in my role.
Amazing. Well, I see our final panelist has joined us. Wonderful.
Hello.
So with that, I'm going to get us back on schedule. So let's do this. Let's get our slides up here. Fantastic. Well, I am so excited to welcome everybody to episode 20 of the HR Game Changers series. Today, we're going to be talking about future-ready leaders to some amazing future-ready leaders, and they're going to share their learnings and insights and ideas around how we can build an AI leadership bench. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If this is your 20th time joining us, awesome. You're a super user. We've done over 1.5 years of this series, which is really exciting. And today, like I said, we're going to explore how AI is transforming organizations. If you have any peers or colleagues who would love to be included on future sessions, I'll drop the link in the chat, but feel free to invite them. And for everyone who is listening along live, if you have questions, we have a Q&A, so please drop them in. I'll be moderating that during the webinar, and please feel free to share them along. So without further ado, I would love to do some introductions. I mentioned in the call, but I'm Janelle. I'm your moderator. I'm currently working at Stripe in a people, talent, and brand role. And prior, I was at a company called Red AI that was a user of Go Profiles, which is how I got connected to this fine organization. And they really helped Red AI with a lot of tremendous growth and really understanding our employee population. So just wanted to say really great things about that product. Today's conversation is all about preparing leaders for AI and building our AI toolkits and an AI forward leadership bench. So with that, let's get into it. I would love to start by asking our panelists a two-part question. And so, Samina, I'm going to look to you first. If you could share, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a child? And what are you doing now? And do the two have anything in common?
What a great question. I always wanted to be a psychologist. Why? Because I was born in a family of psychologists, and I've always enjoyed thinking about behavioral experiments. What if I do this? What's going to be the result? What if I do something else? What's going to be the result? And it started very early in my life. That curiosity started very early. So I ended up actually studying organizational psychology, not clinical psychology, as probably some of my family members would have hoped for. But organizational psychology and what I'm doing today are quite in sync, I would say. And at a very early age, it was clear to me when I did my first internship that working in people and culture is not going to feel like a job. It's going to feel like a passion that I can do for a long time. So somehow I started my journey at a very early age by having an interest in psychology and decided to go and study organizational psychology back home in Romania in a city called Cluj, which is known today as being one of the tech hubs in Eastern Europe. So I was very fortunate to figure out early, I guess, what I would love to do. And it seems like I'm still doing some of it.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful. It's great to have you. And yes, psychology, I just think never goes out of style in all of our jobs. Up next, Lauren. It's lovely to meet you. Why don't you answer the same question? What did young Lauren want to be as a child?
Young Lauren changed her mind every 6 months. So we wanted to be many, many things. And so among those are, I wanted to be a newscaster, didn't realize how hard that job was. I wanted to be a teacher, didn't realize how hard that job was. And I definitely wanted to be a travel writer as well, because mostly wanted to eat my way through the world. So how does that all of those have some things in common with this and some not. In fact, my mom was in HR growing up, and I was like, I'm not going to do what you do. And yet here I am. And so I think all of those, at the end of it, it's about people and connecting with people from different places, different cultures, and helping like disseminate information and helping people learn about different things. And so that is definitely a component of the job that I'm probably meant to be in. But yes, I changed my mind many times, which I'm sure many of you did too.
That's the great thing, right? We get to reinvent ourselves. And I think AI, this moment that we're in right now, is another opportunity for us to add new job titles to our list. Well, last, Sunena, welcome. Same question for you. It's good to see you. What did you want to be when you were a child? And tell us what you're up to now.
Can you guys see me? Yes, I can see myself. So I'm sure you can see me too. So what did I want to be? This is a very interesting question. So when I was very young, I mean, kind of young, I wanted to be a jazz musician or a musician, specifically jazz musician. So natural progression to HR. I mean, just like clear line. But, in my 20s, after I finished I did a bachelor's and master's in accounting. Don't hold that against me. And then went on to do an advanced master's in human resources. And primarily because my dad was a CEO, and it was something, he was just beloved by his team, by the folks in his organization. And he was very much a people-centric leader. When a technology-centric leader is what you needed in those days. So he was quite different. And I saw how that impacted his organization, the people in his company, and how he stayed on. There was so much longevity in that. He retired at 60, but he worked till he was like 75. He went in every day.
Wow.
Because as a consultant, because he was so deeply connected. And there is something in that impacted me in my career choice for sure. His most famous quote to me was, "Be nice to people on your way up because you might see them on your way down." and was a nice way of emphasizing how we need to be thoughtful and kind in every interaction we have. And it's always stayed with me. So there you go.
That is lovely. That's wonderful, wonderful advice. Well, thank you all so much. I'm so happy to have all three of you here. Let's get into today's discussion points. So we're going to be covering a whole lot of interesting topics. We're going to touch on how we can redefine leadership readiness. We will talk a little bit about succession planning in an uncertain future. We will talk about how you can develop leaders at every level and how you can do it. I love what Sunana said about being kind on the way up, right? I think that's more important now than ever in this new AI era that we're in. How the human edge will continue to become more valuable, looking at things like judgment, empathy, and trust building, and how we as leaders can ensure that they're continuing to be rewarded. And last, we'll talk a little bit about making talent visible, how people are using data to surface high potential employees that traditional processes may overlook. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see our lovely panelists here, all of them. And I've got a list of questions that I'm going to ask. So feel free to just kind of jump in if one tickles your fancy. If anyone on the call would like to ask some questions, please drop those in the chat and I will moderate. So let's get into our first question. So as we talked a little bit at the start about leadership readiness, now that we've seen that AI is reshaping how work is getting done, what capabilities do you all think matter most in the AI era leadership bench that may not have been on your radar 5 years ago?
I can jump in. This is the $1 million question at the moment in terms of what capabilities are we not only kind of assessing but rewarding through the whole continuum of the employee life cycle. For me, and especially in our organization at the moment, we are really an AI-driven platform. When it comes to externally driven platform, right? So we've taken that and thought through how our internal processes, how we mirror that with our internal processes, and it's moving at a lightning pace. So the things that have surfaced in the initial work that we've been doing when it comes to succession or leadership development are behaviors that we used to call soft skills. They were called soft skills, and they're the new hard skills. They are things like connection, curiosity, learning, within the curiosity frame. There's a bit about having a conscience and about how do you think about ethical AI and the impact that has on people and processes and organizations and indeed the world, right, in which we live in. So those are the things that are bubbling up for us from a leadership perspective. We've traditionally looked at technical skills as the hard skills, and we've really pivoted and said, those are skills that can get commoditized now in an AI world. So what are the new hard skills that we need to be thinking about more deeply, but also assessing and developing?
I think I would add, those are great. I love all of those. I couldn't agree more with you. If I had like snaps or whatever you do to spring spirit fingers for all of that. I think the two I would add that are pretty unique to the moment we're in is, and you asked Janelle in your question, that's something we didn't think of before. I'm sure we thought of these before too. I think they're just coming to the top of the pile in a little different way. Yeah. I don't think HR is fundamentally different yet. But I think the two things that have been sticking out to me is the change management skill. I think that's always been something that people need to lean into, but this is a different wave. And being able to get comfortable with something that some of my classically trained change management like accelerators are less good at. And so being a little bit more willing to experiment and try something new, I think is a really important skill. And then the third thing that I think that AI is enabling and bringing is like these real systems thinkers and being able to connect disparate things together that before were in isolated, something sat in Salesforce, something sat in Slack. And so a real systems thinker is thinking about how we connect those together. So not just connecting with each other, but connecting like an entire ecosystem and an organization. Those are some of the skills that I'm thinking about that I would argue are sat in that soft skill bucket that Sunana mentioned as well.
Love it. So a follow-up to that question, how are you avoiding over-indexing on AI enthusiasts, right? The people who are just sort of jumping in at all costs and becoming, the highest producer of Claude tokens in your team, and maybe missing the leaders who are excelling at the human judgment, right? The trust building skills that AI just simply, can't ever replace.
Yeah, I can jump in here. I mean, what's clear in this time and age is that what's scarce is judgment under ambiguity and wisdom, and we're optimizing for finding employees and talent and leaders who are leading from the front with these things in mind. But when I think about what are the readiness signals today to be a good leader, I'm thinking about how fast can someone update their mental model based on new data? How good is someone at asking questions, not just providing answers? So leading with curiosity, really understanding potential risks and how to mitigate those risks. I'm also looking at willingness to be wrong in public when it costs you something as a leader, and willingness to take full responsibility on the output of AI, and also how comfortable is going to be someone to lead when we're entering uncharted territories. How comfortable is someone to lead hybrid teams, human and AI, and how are our leaders thinking about building that empathy across every single decision that they make as a leader, to not deploy AI at people, but to use AI as a force multiplier. So as all of my colleagues here said, we're going beyond how quickly and how deep you're going into the AI technology and how many tokens you're using on a monthly or weekly or daily basis, into how is this serving the organization that you're leading? What are the results? And how do you do it in a way that is going to make us as leaders proud of ourselves when we're going to look back a few years from now?
To get super tactical and pile onto that, and we have not finished this. This is very much a work in progress. And so by no means do I think that I'm ahead of many of you. I'm probably behind. But one of the things we're doing for each of our core business units is we're not just like, everybody use AI. We're like, what are the very specific problems we want to solve with AI first? Who are the people that we're going to leverage to help build it? And then how are we going to enable it? So it's very business outcome focused. My best partner in the organization is the CFO, and he's highly skeptical that people are going to spend tons and tons of time experimenting and not doing their day job. And it's an interesting dichotomy of what's out in the ecosystem, because everyone's like, experiment. But it's like, okay, we want some experimentation, but in service of specific outcomes. And so having those clear, we're kind of making a scorecard for each leader, or a plan, we're calling it, with key outcomes that we want to do. And so how we're going to be very intentional about who are driving against what, while also enabling everyone on the basics of prompting and basic agent building and whatnot as well. So that's how we're kind of looking at it in a practical way. We're definitely not incentivizing token usage purchase.
We're publishing our token burners. No, I'm teasing.
Shameless.
Name and shame. No, but I think, what you guys have said is pretty much what we're thinking about. It's work in progress. I mean, all of us are work in progress at the moment. The technology is moving at such a fast pace. But I think one thing that's really important for us is around use cases, anchoring around use cases rather than saying, let's just, go wild and crazy, right? And I think there's merit to that, because it develops a culture of experimentation and learning. So we've clearly said we're going to have an enterprise-wide tool. We're debating, whether we have one or two, because we have a lot of engineers in our organization. But then very clearly talking about what are the use cases that we want to solve for, and what are the outcomes that we want to drive from those use cases. Moving back to the CFO argument of, I'm going to, bust my budget very soon, Suni, with all of these token burners. So so we're just trying to play that dance, as best as we can today with what we know today. the really interesting part about where we're going to is that things are changing on a daily basis, right? So we have to be adaptable and curious and agile, and work in the moment rather than the tried and tested ways of the past.
Yeah. We are carving out some time for fun experimentation, ideally linked to
Oh, I love
business
that.
objectives.
Yeah.
So we have some hackathons. We started with the technical side of the house. Obviously, we want to move across the aisle, and we want to invite people into hackathons so they can use freely some of these tools and open their imaginations to things that probably on a day-to-day basis, when you're in front of your to-do list, you probably don't have the energy to think creatively about how you're going to do things differently or experimenting in other ways. But that is showing huge spikes in creativity on how we design, product, on how we think about engineering and even non-engineering, non-technical problems that are in front of us. And we want to keep pairing that with a little bit more of a controlled approach where we identify the most important things we want to solve as a business. We identify what can be done with AI and agents and skills, and then create a library of things. So hopefully we can deploy all of these things that were created to the entire organization. So we avoid someone, for example, in marketing, creating something that was created already in HR or in finance or in a different side of the house. And we learn that by documenting all these things and sharing skills across the organization, we don't duplicate efforts that should not be duplicated.
I think duplication is a hard one, though. I mean, just to be honest, we're struggling with that at an organizational level. We're doing pretty much some of the similar things that you talked about, Samina, but we're finding that it's not always kind of duplication proof, and we uncover things that are happening in one part of the organization, and I think it's funny because we're having this conversation yesterday. I'm the co-chair of our AI transformation group. With my R&D leader, my engineering leader, and we're talking about do we get comfortable with some level of uncomfortableness? We want to be able to manage all of this well, but there are some instances where that might not be a bad thing. We learn and we come together and we solve together. The one other thing that I'll say, we have a internal innovation hackathon called Spark that is very, very focused on AI, and that's coming up pretty soon. So we're excited about that. But we've also added this concept of development days. So every quarter, in all of our major sites, but also for our remote employees, we have time carved out, which is called a development day, for an entire day, where there's peer-to-peer learning. So, peers teach each other, there's a lot of conversation. There might be some, kind of talks that are useful, from a deployment or a usage perspective, but it's mainly focused on peer-to-peer learning. And that has been very exciting for folks to, see that we're doing, but also focusing on developing folks rather than this new tech wave of like, I'm going to do X percentage of layoffs to, provide room for more AI skills. We're like, why don't we actually train and develop our folks and provide avenues to do that organizationally?
You bring up a really good point, and I think I'm going to ask a follow-up question for the group here. Employee anxiety around AI, I think, is very real, right? You touched on this notion of, everyone's going to get laid off because AI is happening. And so how are you helping your people adapt and grow alongside of these new tools rather than feeling replaced or left behind from it? So now you touched on the fact that you're really kind of focused on peer-to-peer learning. What are some other things that you all are thinking about or trying or have seen that you think will help everyone grow alongside AI?
I would also say that angst isn't just like being automated away. I think people have a lot of anxiety about two things internally. I just did this kind of giant listening tour, and I think people don't know where to start. Like they're just afraid of learning a new skill. So that is a real thing. There's the like brain drain fear of like that they won't be able to think anymore. That's real. And then the third one that I'm seeing in our organization is like, I have so much to do already. When am I also going to learn this skill? One of the things we're going to pilot, and I will be honest, it's similar to the peer-to-peer stuff, is we're going to do a spotlight at the company level of a use case that can be repeatable. And we want the feature questions are going to be like, what'd you build? How did you build it? What went wrong? What was hard? And we'll do that spotlight. And then we do have some more, what I would call like traditional learning, which is generally e-learning for people to help prompting or building basic agents or that kind of thing too. So, but I would say in a space like AI, which is so rapidly evolving, the most current content is your peer-to-peer. So it's probably not the answer you wanted to know, but that's at least
Great
what
answer.
I think the focus on, if at an organizational level we can get to the point where we're focusing on developing rather than saying replacing, and that's the message. We've been very intentional about our message via our AI transformation team and group. We want to enable and we want to develop and we want to promote a culture of learning and a culture of not having the answers to every question, which is what the old leadership style model was, but asking a lot of good questions and being curious. So we've really over-rotated on that messaging to our team. So hopefully that alleviates some of the fear, but it is real and it is there, to your point, right?
And employees are watching leaders what they do, not what they say, or maybe they watch leaders on both things, right? If you're saying one thing, but then you deploy AI at the employees instead of for the employees, it's becoming obvious in the organizational culture, right? And also on top of that, all the news, all the articles that we all read are creating a lot of anxiety and are really unhelpful in how they describe what larger maybe companies are doing in regards to their workforce. And I'm always reminding our leaders to be very intentional about how we communicate and what we do in regards to AI, because that's the clearest message that your workforce is receiving from the leadership team. And I'm a big fan of deploying AI for the employees, not at the employees. But there is also a little bit of a FOMO in the market that if you don't do what your competitors are doing, maybe you're going to be left behind. And if everyone starts reducing headcount and cutting roles and replacing roles without really understanding the whole financial impact of what this potentially means, we've been through these cycles in tech many, many times. There is a little bit of FOMO that's happening right now, and a lot of folks that are following the biggest voices in the industry right now.
Something that we've been trying on my current team is giving someone an easy AI task that really gives them time back in their day. And so one of the first things I've said to everyone who has said, I want to make something, make yourself a chief of staff, right? Make yourself something that will make your life easier, that will tell you how to use AI or where it could help. And there's been, I think, a bit of a relief on people who might have been a little bit squeamish about it to say, oh, wow, I could see that, this is instantly making things better for me, rather than, having them look at their current bandwidth and saying, find where you can put in AI when you don't really even know what it's fully capable yet until you kind of internalize it for yourself. So a follow-up question on what we were just chatting about. So not everyone is just raising their hand, dying to get in to learning and being curious. How are you identifying employees or cohorts that may need the most support? And are you using any particular systems or signals to make sure that there aren't people who are quietly falling behind on these trends?
In our engineering organization, we are starting to pilot, I think it's called Git AI, which like literally measures use. And we're not using it at all for performance like this. I came from Meta, like I know all the things. We're not like using it at all, but it is helping us understand. And there's a couple, especially in the engineering organization, who are less inclined to use it. And so we approach it with the same curiosity we would approach any other tool rollout, like when people don't want to use Salesforce on the sales team. So, which is a problem. So we ask, like, what is the barrier here? Why, what's happening? And then we look at the output. And if the output and expectations are meeting all the standards that they need to meet, which, spoiler alert, the pace of commits is smaller. We have that challenge, and we talk about that, and we help people, and we break it down for every person. Some people it's like it's emotional, and some people it's psychological, and I look at those a little bit differently, and some of it's capability, and capability we can fix. Some of the other ones we have to break down a little bit. I've not terminated anyone because they're not using Cloud Code, but if anything, I'd be terminating because the output wasn't where it needed to be, and they're not fully leveraging the tools that they need to get there. I don't have that. We're not quite there yet on the non-technical side of business at this point.
You might be terminating someone for being a token burner, though. So
correct. I haven't yet, but I'm sure I will.
Exactly. But I think this whole conversation about performance is a really interesting one, and it is gaining a lot of traction in our industry, especially in tech, right? With some big tech using it more overtly than others. It is to your point, we've made most strides there in the engineering organization. Just because the work is relevant, you can think about a direct output and input. We've not deployed it anywhere else in the organization, and we've not deployed it in engineering from a performance perspective. It's just from a tool usage perspective, to your point, right? But it's always very interesting because we have very global workforce, and in Europe, the rules around AI usage for employees have to go through a works council, because we can't deploy unilaterally a tool and say, you must use it. And actually that has been a good forcing function for us to be more thoughtful around, what are we doing really? What are the outcomes we're measuring? And how do you communicate to your employee base and think about it from a more empathetic lens than not. So we've used that to advantage rather than think of it as a blocker.
I was connecting with a few tech leaders a few weeks ago at another event, and one of them was saying that their company had started understanding the correlation between token usage and previous performance, which I think was really interesting. And a few leaders that were in this session had were nodding along and saying they did notice that their people who were using more tokens or who were being more curious were historically their strongest performers. So they're not necessarily measuring it forward, but they were looking at it sort of in the rear view mirror to see how it does tie to performance. And it just was an interesting, musing around, would you expect people who are already strong performers to be the most curious by nature, or the first ones to kind of jump in, or is it a different beast altogether? And those rules may not apply.
I think that's going to be hyper dependent on what your organization values and has historically valued.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
There's a difference between high usage and disproportionate usage that they're just trying to drive up their token usage.
Totally.
And they're just running something in the background all the time that's not actually building anything. But I think that's pretty cool. And I'm not surprised that correlation exists. And it probably does in most companies, but I do think it's going to matter what an organization values.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about succession planning, right? So AI is changing job functions really quickly, and I think maybe even faster than our traditional succession planning timelines were built for. How are you as leaders approaching bench building, knowing that the roles you may be looking for, today might look completely different in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I find this question fascinating. In the past, I was thinking about succession planning as, do I have a person who's ready to jump in if my VP is departing, right? Today, I think the whole conversation is evolving. I'm thinking about, you're not replacing a person necessarily anymore. Sometimes you might, but you're replacing a capability set. And sometimes that can be a person, and sometimes that can be a system, an AI tool, right? That's how I'm thinking about it. And I'm not even thinking about, oh my gosh, what if my VP of X is departing? I'm thinking, what if the role itself is transforming so fast that maybe, the person in the role is not catching up with how fast things are moving, and how can I support them to the best of my ability to get there in the moment that we hope they're gonna get there. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. And I'm thinking about two things that are a little bit wide. I'm thinking about, stretch successor, someone who traditionally was, the go-to succession person in the succession planning project. But I'm also thinking about a completely wild card, someone who might be ready for the role or for where the role is going in 12 to 24 months. So I really think about two things right now when I think about succession planning. Do I need a person or do I need a system? And do I go on this path, or do I completely reinvent the role for where I believe some of the roles are going to evolve in the next 12 to 24 months? And the answer might be very different.
Anyone else have a thought on that topic?
I have a I have a contrary view on this, so it's interesting. Succession planning is something that I've been very deeply embedded in for a long time, and had lots of success in the past, right? In terms of how we've identified successors, and then those folks have moved into CEO roles in multiple organizations that I've led HR for. So it's something that is near and dear to my heart because I've seen a lot of positive outcomes. I would say that the way we've planned for succession has been, from a capability perspective. I've not looked at succession as a role replacement. I've always approached it as a capability, a capability issue at an organizational level. So that has not changed, right? I think what AI has kind of accelerated for us is the need for us to think about leadership differently and how we promote various different leadership behaviors, right? I mean, we've talked about the curiosity elements, about not being the smartest kid in the class, but developing smart kids. So we've moved our continuums a little bit from a leadership capability perspective. But arguably, succession when succession has been successful in the past, it has not been a role-based succession model, but more a capability-based succession model, which I think is technology-proof. It doesn't matter whether it's AI or it's the internet or it's the Industrial Revolution, right?
Sure.
Thinking about it in a more kind of AI-proof way is something that we are going to be applying to Omnissa moving forward, because we don't have a succession framework. So we're actually starting from scratch, which is awesome. So we have a chance to actually try out different ways of thinking about capability, about being technology agnostic, about promoting and developing talent producers, not talent hoarders, folks that actually have are more utility players rather than the hierarchical move in a certain function.
It's great. So we've talked a lot about bench and peer-to-peer. Let's talk about responsible AI deployment. So what frameworks or guardrails are you all putting into place to making sure that AI is being deployed responsibly across your organizations? And where does HR's ownership start or stop? Is that something that is, currently being directed by you, or is it sitting elsewhere, or is it to be determined?
And it sounds like Samina might be in a similar camp, or maybe Suni too, but we have a kind of cross-functional AI council. It's got our GC, it's got our business systems, it's got, someone who does AI, like literally PhD, that's what they do. Myself, CEO and whatnot. And we have, and InfoSec, certainly InfoSec. And we have collaboratively kind of come up with our guidelines as an organization, and we have rolled them out. We now have an AI-focused reminder in every town hall, which happen monthly for us. We happen to have a very funny gentleman on the AI team who makes it funny, and everybody wants to listen to him, which really helps. And awesome. He's the best slides in the company. And and so it is a joint effort, and I do not want to be the AI police. And so we are generally pretty open to certain levels of experimentation. Obviously, we have some folks in EMEA as well. We have clients in EMEA. We have PII from clients. We have to consider all of that kind of thing. But generally speaking, if you're not running OpenClaw on your computer or OpenClaw-like things, we have a tolerance for certain risk. One of the things we're trying to do is get a very short, like 3-minute training that everyone goes through just from a compliance perspective so that people know exactly what they can and can't put in, because there's definitely a lot of questions about like HR data and whatnot. But we do update it like once a quarter. We're like looking at it and being like, do we need to update this? Because chances are a new thing has been leashed to the public and we need to iterate on it. So yeah.
+1.
Great. Well, I'm going to move us on to some audience questions. And these are a couple that we got earlier in the week. And if there's any more, feel free to drop them in the chat. But we're kind of getting into that home stretch with our panelists. So the first question is, how do you keep leadership development programs from going stale when AI is evolving faster than any curriculum can keep up with?
I'm happy to jump in here. So
Great.
we launched about 3 months ago a leadership accelerator or decision-making training. And I was thinking many nights about how to embed AI in this training to enable everyone to use it, but to use it responsibly. So we did a couple of things. Every single module talks about how we can use AI to do some things better as leaders. And then it follows with a little bit of a homework, asking everyone to lean in and try some things and come back the second session of the leadership training or decision-making training to really share with the group how they're using AI to enhance, engagement, retention of their top performers, really get the right signals of burnout, for example, to potentially predict where they might need to jump in and prevent a departure or help with reorganizing how that team is doing the work that they're doing. And that helped a lot. I also realized that when we implemented this at Uptempo, a lot of leaders were not always comfortable sharing their anxiety related to AI and the push to reinvent how the work is being done. So then what I did, I democratized access to executive coaching. So they had a safe space, not only to HR, but to a third-party independent person to the organization where they can share some of their feelings and thought through process as they go and navigate this change. And then the third thing that I realized is that we cannot train only our leaders, and we cannot optimize leadership training and decision-making training embedded by AI based on where you are in the org chart, because in the new world, someone who is jumping in a CS role and is using AI to solve a critical escalation for a customer is becoming a decision maker and a leader. And I'm planning to deploy this training after testing it with the first group to everyone in the organization, so that we take everyone to how you're making decisions, how you embed AI in your day-to-day work. As a leader, being formal or informal, we all gonna need to go to this motion. So that's what I'm testing with. I'm gonna collect the feedback and the data in about 3 months when the training is ending. We have a 6 months block on our calendars, and we meet twice a month as a team. And I'm happy to report back with the learnings and the data.
Great.
I would just add that it's interesting because we're doing a lot of like thinking about how do we enable managers. The manager is a big focus for us, and it is actually so cool to be able to use AI to do really new and different things when it comes to development. So I think it's a great time for us to actually rethink the way we've done development so in a traditional way in the past. And we thought we were being super cool by doing action learning and all of these cool things from a development standpoint. I think now with AI and the ability to actually frame the opportunity, the problem sets to leaders from a business standpoint, and get them to be involved in actually thinking about how to accelerate the business, which is not just the CEO and the ELT's responsibility, but everyone's responsibility in the organization. AI helps us actually open that to everyone. So we're very excited. Our capability development team and I are super, super excited about how we can use AI to reimagine manager development. And we're just piloting something in the next couple of months. So I'd love to report back without giving away too much, but we're trialing something quite unique and different. And I'm having a conversation with my leader for capability development tomorrow, and she's super excited. So I think just to turn that on its head, it's an exciting time, and let's leverage and use it to our advantage.
Great. Well, the final question that we received is HR is asking the rest of the organization to embrace AI and redesign how they work. How are you applying that to your own people team?
What is HR asking? Is HR asking?
The question, I think the question as it stands is, what are your people? Are your people teams moving at the same rate of change and adoption as the rest?
HR is not asking people to adopt AI. It's a business imperative, but we're using it we're actually focused on use cases rather than use Claude and knock yourself out. We're like, okay, there are these 4 use cases, and there's a talent acquisition use case. Actually, unfortunately or fortunately, talent acquisition is the most relevant use case, so we're using it through the cycle, the TA cycle. But in development, I just talked about one use case for manager development. We're also using it for succession. We're using it for development days. We're really using it in the development continuum, and then we're doing a lot of work with use cases in the HR ops area. So, shared services, tier 0 and 1 support, moving to the tier 2 and tier 3, and, what can we use there? I used to talk a lot last year about AI and the impact on HR. And, my prediction is, 70% of what we do in HR will actually be able to be leveraged via AI, and the 30%, which is all around the judgment and the coaching and the human interaction skills, will be really important in the next 3 years if we do it well. So that's how my team and I are thinking about it today.
I think one of the things I had my team start doing a while ago was everyone had to build a bot. I gave them a quarter. I was like, it can tell. I happen to own facilities, so it can tell you when the toilet paper needs to be refilled. I didn't care what it did. And so we've got some really good use cases here too. Some recruiting is definitely a big one. How do you think about, how do we use the data we have from our systems to build more effective scorecards, not just job descriptions, but job description scorecards, automation to go through the entire approval process. One of the things that our team has spent a lot of time is automating the onboarding process and what is getting slacked to people. It's a very Slack heavy culture. Things were happening in greenhouse onboarding in a way that no one was interacting with. And so moving all that to Slack and creating a bot there has been really helpful. My wildest hopes and dreams are in my little HR MCP where all of the different things are connected. And so that I can build more customized automated onboarding content. I just saw someone from Zapier post about what they're doing there. And so I'm pretty excited about being able to do that. And then I've played around with making a business partner bot, and because sometimes managers, they're nervous to talk to a real human about a performance issue or whatever. And so training it on some of the basics with answers that I feel comfortable with, I keep testing it, is something I'm experimenting with right now. And those you need a $20 Claude subscription with. My one favorite use case I'll give you for me personally is that it has access to all my Slacks and emails. And I just asked it to give me feedback on how I was leading. And I now have it do that to me on a weekly basis. And it has changed how I communicate and interact over Slack. And so it's really basic. But I think the more the more it listens to us creepily enough, the more productive it can be on, whether that's, it started with Gong calls. And I think now there's even more with Zoom and Google Chat and whatnot.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so cool. I was at Gong, so that's nice.
Saw that.
With Gong calls. That's cool. That's really cool.
I'm also happy to share what I did with my team to invite my entire team in. I said, let's create the old school way, an Excel or a spreadsheet with all the projects and the tasks that we are doing. And then I asked my team to rate which tasks are they more excited about or less excited about. And I said, okay, what if we use AI to automate some of the not so sexy, not so exciting part of the work, so that we can focus on the things that are bringing us joy and they're more strategic and they are more fun. So we started there and we created all sorts of skills from recruiting to HR ops to really help us with the drudgery work, right? And then we said, okay, now we can go above that and build something to really make it fun. So we have chief of staffs, we have an executive coach who, for example, is looking at my calendar and is telling me, okay, you have this thing tomorrow happening. You need to carve out at least an hour to be in the headspace and prep for it. And you have other speaking engagements, or you have to travel. And this is how heavy traveling you have going on. This is how you can optimize things. And it's really helping keep my head clear. For example, every morning, all of us here used to wake up to 60 emails and not knowing where to run. Now I have my coffee at 8 a.m. I'm opening my chief of staff from Claude, and I know exactly what's happening in my world. And on top of that, I integrated it with all of the Slack, the Confluence, the Notions of the world, everything you can imagine. And I also get a snapshot of what's happening in the organization. So who's traveling, where they are traveling, incidents, new customers, churn, new business being won, all of the things that are happening. And I get a snapshot in 10 minutes and I know exactly what's going on. And it's really helpful. But doing this with the team and asking them to rate what are you most exciting and less exciting, and eliminating some of the drudgery from their day-to-day really helped leaning into AI more and more and making it more fun.
I do just want to say, when I created my not as sophisticated chief of staff as yours, it broke like 15 times before I could get the connection to actually work. So like, it all sounds like it's really easy, but there's a lot of trial and error. Or even my little HR business partner, I'm like, that's not the advice I would give it. So like, it does take it. I don't think people always appreciate how much time on the back end it takes to train something. You're training a new hire. Like, it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. The plumbing takes a lot of time, and no one really talks about the trial and error, the hours spent on fine-tuning some of these things and agents and skills to work the way we expect them to work. It is almost like training a new hire or an intern.
An intern, I would say, like, it's not an experienced new hire. So it takes some time. And that's where the judgment piece comes in, is like, you have to still need a human right now to tell AI, like, you're wrong.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. I think that was just a really honest, authentic, insightful conversation. I really appreciated how you all gave really interesting things for people to take away and maybe go back and implement, but then also just the real hard truth of it's hard. It's hard to find time to do this. Sometimes the models don't work out. We're all learning it together, which I really think, we are all in this together. And I think the more that we can come together as leaders, externally, internally, within our own organizations to continue the knowledge sharing, I think we'll be better for it. So thank you so much to my panelists. I've popped the slides back up on the screen to remind everyone of our upcoming episodes. In June, we'll cover the AI adoption gap, which should the 80-20 problem no one's talking about. And then in July, for our summer session, we'll talk about HR convergence, how we can build the people experience playbook. So with that, I also want to thanks to Go Profiles. If you haven't checked them out, definitely do. They're from HR to GTM to engineering and IT. I think it's a really great resource, and they also offer a free trial. So go check it out. And just want to thank our amazing panelists today. You were all so lovely. I know I learned a tremendous amount, and I'm excited to see what you will all keep doing in this space. Thanks to our listeners, live and recorded otherwise. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their week. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.